I came out of this game just incredibly impressed with Oregon. I think that obviously we talk about signature wins all the time in college football, and this is the definition of that for Dan Lanning and for Oregon. And it's just amazing to have after an off season where a bunch of big jobs open and you had Dan Lanning say, nope, I'm good. I want to win a national championship here. Well, this was that next step, winning games like this.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I am your host, Yogi Roth, and what a weekend it was. Are you kidding me? The weekend we all looked to, hoping it would deliver, absolutely delivered in spades. With that, let's welcome in co-founder of Y Option, Jim Thornby. Jim, you're fresh off of an amazing week down at Disney, fall break with the fam, but you're tweeting up a storm, man. Like, you have mastered being in line and talking about college football through the lens of the West Coast. How was the trip? How are you doing?
Yeah, it was great. It was, it kind of timed out perfectly because it was, that Calgorithm hangover, and we're reached the mid-season. And so I think we both kind of needed a little bit of a little rejuvenation. But I mean, it's not like we still kept doing what we were doing. And like, to your point, like that's the beauty of this job is like, besides this part right here, and even really this part, if we wanted to, like you can kind of do it anywhere in the world. Like, so yeah, I'm literally, sending out tweets from line at Disneyland and stuff like that. But whatever, always focused then. But there's always the you see online or whatever about the conversation about like people scheduling fall weddings during college football season. So this was a weekday activities. But by Friday it was back locked in so that I could watch that Utah Arizona State game on Friday night, and then full bore on Saturday. So
yes, it was full bore. It was full bore on a lot of levels. Really excited about today's episode as well. We bring in a good friend, Nicole Auerbach, who is an insider at NBC. She's also an analyst in college football at NBC. She's on the desk every weekend along with Maria Taylor, Chris Sims and company. I mean, she's phenomenal. Can't wait to get to that conversation with her. But before we do, we have to reflect upon this amazing weekend that you referenced, Jim. Began on a Friday. Arizona State knocks off Utah. Kind of amazing when you look at the team picked 18th in the Big 12. Knocks off the team that was favorited to win the Big 12 by us as well. What a performance from Kenny Dillingham's squad. Then you kick off the party on Saturday. Well, what a day it was. And of course, we're talking about not only SC Penn State, but then Oregon and Ohio State. I was in LA, had UCLA, Minnesota, another incredible finish with our crew on Big Ten Network, Guy Haber and Rhett Lewis, two veterans of this podcast as well here at Y Option. And the game just continued into the night, right? Boise State and Hawaii late at night. So it was a full-on Saturday of college football, and that means only one thing. We've got our Go, Go, Go awards. And you know the deal. From the thrill of victory to the sting and the burn of defeat, from the gridiron grit to the sideline spirit. Look, college football is driven by passion. It is driven by perseverance, and we all love the pageantry. Who doesn't love College Game Day on the West Coast 2 weeks in a row? And that is why we partnered with 76 for these awards. They are our Go, Go, Go awards, kind of the go-getter awards, like everybody who's trying to go for it, cut it loose, go for it on a fourth down, maybe an onside kick. Yeah, that's what I'm hinting to our award winners this week. So, Jim, I see what
you're putting down there. Right?
Yeah, you do. Yeah. Who are our 4 lucky winners from this past weekend?
Well, it's funny because usually we try and spread the love a little bit, but there was clearly 2 teams that, had great weekends and a lot of heartbreak along the rest of the West Coast. So this was the first time where we had 2 schools win 2 of the awards. So split right down the middle. And I'll just go through them real quick here. So the 5-star QB was Dylan Gabriel. I mean, he was cool as a cucumber, just, really leading that team down. It was the 25th time in his career he's had over 300 yards passing in a game, but this is the first time he ever did it against an AP top 10 team. So, huge win for them. And just to keep it team by team here. So the headset hero, I think, was a no-brainer too with Dan Lanning. it was such a very Dan Lanning game. I mean, talk about, him being aggressive. Did it always work? No. And I think we're going to talk about this part a little bit later, but about the strategies and stuff like that. But it's his first career top 5 win, and just a huge win for that program. And then the other 2 awards both go to the Sun Devils. The Go Gone to Cam Scadaboo. He's been obviously amazing this year, but it's funny. He's had all the chunk plays, but they're all have been in like that 10 to 19 yard kind of range. This time he had his first 2 40+ yard runs of the season, and both of them touchdowns in the second half. The first one to give them the lead, and the second one to kind of put it away. So kind of a no-brainer there for him. Even though Ashton Genty's won that award like every week, almost every week, or at least every other week. So, even though he went over 200, we're giving this one to Cam here because I think he definitely deserved it. And then that dude, again, sticking with the Sun Devils, Caleb McCullough. Like, talk about like taking advantage of an opportunity. Put back in the starting lineup because of a targeting penalty on one of his teammates the week before. Comes through 12 or the game before, 12 tackles, 2 INTs, 1 in the red zone in the first half, the other one to seal the game at the end. Both, Oregon and ASU, both with really kind of huge statements on this weekend. And so kind of we equally split the pot there for the four awards for them.
Yeah, that was really fun to watch. And both of them, there's a red thread, right? It's obviously Oregon and Dan Lanning. And you look at he and Kenny Dillingham and how they've been connected at different stops throughout their careers. The coaches they're all kind of connected to, whether it was the Mike Norvell, Todd Graham, like the whole 9 yards. To watch these 2 programs really have tremendous belief in themselves. I really love watching the players and the coaches celebrate post-game. I also think for these games, there were stark contrasts in the opponent and how they played out. So let's talk about the Friday night game first, Jim, and Utah. Utah, we picked to not only win the Big 12, but to kind of roll in the Big 12. I'll definitely stand on that. And to make noise in the playoff. I think they were built like that defensively. The offensive efficiency they had coming back, the firepower they had coming back, coming off of 2 years ago with a healthy Keithy and Rising. It was the best offense in the history of that school. They kind of looked the part early on in the season. Rising gets hurt in kind of that awkward play where he hurts his hand, and he gets tackled early in this ball game. Never looks like himself. I mean, he's a high percentage completion guy, and it was to the point where you're like, is he going to stay in the game? Coach Witt said afterwards, like, look, this guy's been around a long time. He wasn't going to not play. I understand that. I understand that from a coaching perspective and, of course, from a player point of view. But watching that thing back, you're be blunt, like my heart kind of broke for the guy. Like we all know, because he reflected upon how hard last year was sitting out with the injury and the expectations, especially in this NIL culture, as we've often referenced, players are often seen as transactions at times now when you're looking at rosters and the amount of money that rosters have to pay for players. So I'm curious for your lens, like what have we learned from the end of the game? What do we think about Utah football and where they're going to go at the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a heartbreaker there. And then, Coach Witt came out on Monday and says that Cam's now out indefinitely and that Wilson's going to be the starter kind of going forward here. So we're going to see what happens with Cam. I mean, technically he could be eligible for an 8th year of college football. I know when that came up in the presser, I think that's at a point where they're not going to go to him about that yet. Let him kind of, process everything that's going on right now. But it's heartbreaking because Utah has really been bit by that injury bug this year. Looks like they're going to start to get some of those guys back on defense maybe this week, so we can maybe talk about that later in the week. But I think to me, really, the real story of this game was once again the Sun Devils just proving everybody wrong. I mean, we've mentioned this so many times. I mean, I feel like we mentioned it probably every other podcast about how they were picked last in the Big 12 media poll, and we thought it was a little sketchy at the time. Not that we thought they were going to win the conference or anything like that, but we thought like, oh, this team's better than that. And sure enough, I mean, they're 5-1 right now. I mean, some people were like, oh, are they going to get ranked? And, it's always tough when you're that team on the outside. And I know I saw Doug Tamaro, their great media relations guy, tweeting about it over the weekend, when the two teams at the back end of the top 25 didn't play and the other ones right in front of them, they all won. It seems always like the AP voters are a little hesitant to pull somebody out of the rankings unless there's the loss right there. So there's not always that same, that wiggle room there for them. And there's a lot of teams this weekend that are on that verge, whether it be like Washington State, who we can talk about a little bit later, that's, right there to be a potentially ranked team. But this team is good. I mean, Sam Leavitt does what he has to do. Cam Scadaboo is an absolute beast. I mean, he is just a playmaker. And they're a fun team to watch. And I know I said it even last week, and leading up to this game, when both of us were talking about how much of a sneaky game this was going to be, I said, at some point we may need to have the conversation on who's the best team in Arizona. And I'm not sure it's my alma mater. I think it might be the team up north.
Yeah, and same thing in the state of Utah. It's BYU right now.
Yeah,
and who would have thought that BYU really puts it all over Arizona? Another turnover play game from Noah Fafita and company. I think this, like when we look at just scores, and I want to get you on this because I know you watched every snap of that BYU Arizona game, being the illustrious alum that you are. I think when we look at scores, we're like, whoa, they got drilled. Same thing like Iowa UW. I saw that score. I watched it back this morning, and I said, oh, that was actually a way closer game than the score made it appear. For you, where do you net out in BYU Arizona where those two teams sat in the game?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. The offense has been really frustrating, and you see it all over social media and stuff like that. And I think we're going to get to that portion of this conversation later. But the offense has been frustrating. Noah has not been the Noah that we saw last year for whatever reason that is. He's taken a pounding, whether that's through play call or the offensive line or whatever. He has almost as many interceptions the last two games as he had all of last season. He has more interceptions than he has touchdowns this year. So obviously something is not right there. But on the flip side of that, you got to give a lot of credit to the defense for hanging in there. I mean, I know to your point, you just look at the score, you say, 41 points. But they were already without two of their top defenders coming into the game. Then Jacob Manu gets, ejected for targeting on the fourth play from scrimmage. And then Takario Davis, somewhere either it's late in the first half or whatever, but he doesn't play the second half due to an injury. So for them to really hang in there, and a lot of those points from BYU, what was it? I think it was 24 points off the 4 turnovers. I mean, yeah, converted 4 turnovers into 24 points BYU did. You can't really put that on the defense. I mean, that's just the offense putting them in a bad position. So they got to figure that out, because that was the strength of this team coming in. That was the excitement. Even with Jed Fish leaving for Washington, there was a huge excitement in Tucson this year because they had Noah back and they had T-Mac back. Just those two players alone caused enough of an excitement for people to, kind of start losing their minds now that this team has been a little bit average.
Yeah. It's been a fascinating case study, because I think the league in the Big 12, we've said it many times here, I'll say it again, it reminds me of the Pac-12 in like 2018, 2019, where everybody's really good, but nobody's dominant, right? Utah was that brand coming into the season. Now you look at the top of that standings, you see BYU, and coming into the season, Kalani Sitake was on at least, a handful of writers' proverbial hot seat. And we've known Kalani for a long time, huge fan. We'll do a deep dive on BYU later this week and maybe try to get somebody on from their program next week. But it's just one of those leagues where any weekend, anything can happen. And there's a world where Colorado can go on a run, or Colorado could not win another game this season. And I think you can make that case for a lot of the teams in the league. Okay, let's make a case about the game of the weekend. Do you argue it's a better game than Bama, Georgia, or can we just celebrate 2? I think we could just celebrate 2 when you look at Ohio State and Oregon, the home team, of course, winning both of those games. When you look at that game, Jim, you were watching it in real time. Like, your text thread to me was amazing. I didn't respond to one of them because we had a game going on.
You were kind of busy at the time. But
yeah, but every few minutes I was peeking over. I have my little YouTube TV on. Shout out to YouTube TV over to my right. And I'm like, whoa. Like, every moment was a whoa. What was it like in real time? And then I want to give you my takeaways after watching it back this morning with no audio.
Well, if you want to say the compare and contrast to the Bama-Georgia game, I would say it was a better game. Maybe not as exciting, although still extremely exciting because of the way the game kind of played out. You know, Bama-Georgia, Bama went up on a huge lead, and you're like, oh my God, Bama's amazing. Georgia is lost. And all of a sudden it flipped, and, you know, Bama needs an interception in the end zone to kind of come away with the win there. This game was just back and forth. I think it was the last 7 scoring plays from the second quarter on, the lead changed on every scoring play. Shout out Rob Mosley at Oregon for that little nugget there. But yeah, I mean, it was as far as just, you can't take your eyes off the game at any moment because it was close the entire game. And, you know, kind of as the point we said before, you never know what Lanning's going to do in an aggressive manner. I had friends texting me, he's like, why is he throwing right here? I'm like, yeah, is this your first time watching Oregon? Like, I mean, that's just who he is. And, you know, you live by the sword, die by the sword. And not every single one of them are going to work out, but enough of them work out to put you in a position where you wouldn't have been if you didn't do any of them.
Ready, set, dream cabin nestled in the woods. Just 4 hours to go. New job halfway across the country. Butterflies before a first date. Wherever you go, 76 fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, signature win, yes. 2, I think in the NFL, teams are known for their quarterbacks. In colleges, teams are known for their head coach. Oregon has often, if not always, been known for its brand, at least in the last 20 years with the swoosh. But since adding, you know, and you can go back, right? Brooks, Bellotti, Chip, Helfrich, like, they all had their moments where they were really special, right? Struggled under Willie Taggart. Mario Cristobal got it going again. Dan Lanning's taken it to new heights. I say that because it's an elite brand. I think it's different than any other school in America, and it's got substance, and it's got toughness, and most importantly, it's got depth. Jordan Birch not playing, who's playing his best football of his illustrious 5-star rating coming out of high school, playing the best he's ever played, doesn't go in the game. If you go back to our preseason preview, we talked about one group on this team, and it was the edge rushers, and they have 10 of them. And all 10 of them that are playing right now, they're all, I believe, second-year players, either redshirt freshmen or true sophomores. So whether it's Tatum Tuioti, Mateo Uyunglele, you name it, they, to me, just elevated. It was truly next man up. I think what they did to slow down Ohio State's dominant run game with a quarterback who can run as well was as impressive as anything in this ball game. What did I love most? And we said this in our preview last week. The game was going to come down at least to 2 things in my eyes. One, which quarterback can make more spot throws than the other? Who can make truly spot throws? And I think you saw Dylan Gabriel in his bag of tricks all game long. His double clutch deep post ball was the best throw of the weekend. He's in the pocket. One pump, another one, lets it rip. Like, are you kidding me? Best throw I saw all weekend. I think 2, it was coaching decisions, right? After a dropped PAT on the snap, they decided to go for 2. Don't get it. Well, the very next snap, which is a kickoff, they decided to directly kick it at the front line. It carooms off an Ohio State's player. Clearly didn't expect it or couldn't get out of the way quickly enough. And boom, Oregon's in business. And I think that's to your point of Dan Lanning's taken a lot of flack, and he doesn't run away from it.
No, not
decisions to go for it on 4th down against Washington. You've seen it in multiple instances in his
Oregon
young
State game. You know,
there you go, Oregon State game. Like, his young tenure as the Oregon head coach, he's been nothing but aggressive. But he often says the same phrase, which is, "We got to go to the doctors the next day," him included. And I love that accountability for him. And I think we're watching him not only evolve as a coach, but also not lose the aggressive nature that his team reflects. I'll add in the last element. And it wasn't in totality in this game, but I thought this team, for the most part, right, spitting in someone's face that doesn't fall into this category, but the poise that they had. The poise that this team had in a huge stage, the biggest one in Dan Lanning's career, the biggest home game in the history of this program, most people ever there. We all knew what the game was and what it meant. To me, it was on display for the majority of this ball game. And as I watched it back, again, without the audio, I was most impressed with the offensive and defensive fronts. It wasn't perfect, right? There was a couple poor snaps, but overall, they were moving the line of scrimmage. And defensively, they weren't getting gashed. There were moments where Ohio State got big runs, no doubt, but it wasn't all game long. And I thought the defense elevated when they needed to. And my last point, and I want to make this perfectly clear for the country to hear, because when we talk about wide receiver play and the most dominant cores, it's very fair to have Ohio State in the conversation. It's very appropriate to have SC in the conversation. It must now lead with the Oregon Ducks, with the way that Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, you could add in, of course, Terrence Ferguson and company. You have to talk about this group as being the most explosive and dynamic in America. Will Stein called them a basketball team heading into the season. They got a power forward. They got a point guard. They got a shooting guard. They got a little bit of everything. That was on display when they needed it most. Look no further than the final drive and a dig route by Ferguson to put them in position to regain the lead. And I think that this receiving corps probably took it a little personal. They haven't gotten enough shine. They haven't gotten enough play, and Ohio State had. Rightfully so, one might argue, about Ohio State. But Oregon State, it's okay to have two really special ones, or Oregon needs to be in that conversation, the Oregon Ducks at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, and it's funny because, we had this conversation off air earlier today, just talking about like games you care about, games you don't. Like, and it's not about caring; it's about bandwidth.
Yeah,
and like with Evan Stewart, when he was at A&M, I never watched Texas A&M. Maybe a snap here or there or whatever, but I'd be completely lying to you if I watched a lot of Evan Stewart at Texas A&M. Yeah. That dude is legit. I mean, I know he came in as a hugely sought after recruit, but I don't remember seeing a ton of stuff with him at A&M. But he was great in that game. And you also, you brought up the spitting incident, and I will give Trayshawn Holden some credit for taking a lot of responsibility about that moment. He tweeted out an apology and stuff like that. So it seems like, he knew that he made a giant mistake, which could have easily cost that team that game. But yeah, that receiver group is legit. And it's funny too, because now, like, you think about this game, and we've talked about it, like, oh, let's see it again in the Big Ten title game, but like, obviously now Oregon is one of those teams in the driver's seat, but like they're currently in a 3-way tie. Them, Penn State, Indiana, all 3-0. None of them play each other.
Right. The Jim Thornby special.
I mean, now granted, Ohio State still plays both Penn State and Indiana. So Ohio State will have their say on, kind of who else is in the mix, assuming that Oregon continues on with what they're doing. But, I've said it multiple times throughout the last couple months. I mean, if we get to the point where it's Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana, all undefeated come December, like my head would explode trying to do the math on that.
Don't do the math. We'll bring somebody on that can do the math.
Yeah,
for us.
Exactly. I've retired from that line of work.
I love that. All right, I want 2 quick thoughts on Oregon before we move on. One, I really appreciate their schedule for this team. They just had a huge win. We've seen what happens to teams after huge wins. Small sample size. Bama lost the very next week at Vanderbilt. This team is going on a short week on a Friday night to Purdue that had one of the most miraculous comebacks to almost win of the weekend that we saw. They lose in overtime at Illinois, but it was phenomenal. Their head coach, who is known as the defensive coordinator, is now calling the plays on offense. So storylines galore in the Big Ten. They got to go there on a Friday night. They'll be dialed. Then they get Illinois at home. Illinois is a top 25 team. See what they do this weekend. Then, because they play Michigan. Then they go to Michigan. The Big House gets your attention no matter what. Maryland at home in only 2 home games left in Autzen. I think that's always a note that plays well for a senior-laden group that's at least got a lot of leaders like Jeffrey Bassa and company. Then they go to Wisconsin, jump around. Here we go. They get a bye, and then they play their rival in UW, one of their rivals in UW. So I just think that from a focus standpoint, like every other week, there's kind of like a marquee moment. So I don't see this team losing an element of focus or feeling that they've arrived. I don't think that's going to happen. I think the short week helps them. And then the last thing, and I think this needs to be said, the margins in this game among top teams in big games, you saw it with Penn State and SC. We've seen it really with SC in all of their losses this year. Same thing in Ohio State and Oregon. The margin's so small, right? It's 2 snaps. If there's 2 more seconds in the game, are we talking about an epic Ohio State finish and they kick a field goal to walk off and win on the road? So I just say that, like, it's okay to have a bunch of really talented teams. To that point, it's the little things that also allow you to win it. And I'll go back to Dan Lanning's DNA traits. He told me about them day one when he got the job, which is connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice. I thought all 4 were on display. I really believe that this team is on the path to doing something really special. I think they're the most improved team in America, from calling their opener to watching them struggle against the Heisman favorite right now at Boise State, Nashon Ginty, the running back. And now here we are after the greatest win, at least in the regular season, one might argue, from a ranking perspective in Oregon football history. So there's the piece. Let's put that one to bed, Jim. Let's get ridiculous for a minute here before we get to our interview with Nicole Auerbach, which is phenomenal. Appreciate her time. We live in a world where we're thoughtful. That's what we pride this show on. And also a world that is not, right? It's knee-jerk reaction. It feels like the hot seat is kind of like being discussed for Kalen DeBoer, Jedd Fisch in year 1 and Brent Brennan in year 1. I want to give you the floor here because you're the one that brought it to my attention, because thankfully you're on social media a little bit more than I am. So
sadly, yes, on a lot more often than you are. But yeah, and it's funny because you see, Twitter can be just an absolute wasteland if you let it, and I tend to let it too many times. But like, you see the reactions, and you mentioned all 3 of them kind of tangentially as we've kind of gone through here, and we kind of brought it up, since that Bama, holding on to beat Georgia, they lost to Vandy, they struggled this last weekend, but they still won. And it's just like, and we don't hear that one as much because we're not in the Southeast. We're not, around. I don't follow nearly as many of those media members as I do here in our footprint. But I've seen it with fans in Seattle and fans in Tucson, and already being like, oh yeah, Jed's not the guy, or Brent is not the guy. And it's like, sure, have they maybe not done, they're both of them are coming off historic seasons, but they're new coaches in that program with a lot of new players. So that stuff doesn't just gel overnight. And I think, people's expectations are kind of maybe a little misguided. And in this 12-team playoff era, now granted, both of these teams are probably not ones that we're going to see in that 12-team playoff. But it's kind of, I think everyone needs to go through one full season of this era of college football to really kind of understand what is a good season and what is not. And if you think that you're going to fire a coach after, in the middle of the first year, financial suicide. I mean, like, it's insane. Like, how do you think you're going to pay that? And then who's going to want to come there after you just got rid of the guy midway through his first, midway or at the end of his first season? Like, that's a good way to just keep continuing to set your program back further and further. Patience is not something that a lot of people like in college football, and understandable. But when you're taking over a new program and you have all new players, and it's this portal era, NIL era, like everything else, that even the established coaches are still trying to figure out how this is all working. Not even mention the coaches established, but established in their home. It takes we need to like simmer down a little bit on like, let's trying to fire people in year 1.
Yeah, I like it. Simmer down. Nothing really to add other than, if you think that way, you're not for us. Keep it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in all three of those guys. And let's just remember the calendar of when they got hired. So much, I think, in year one for those three, regardless of returners. Two things still matter most. Chris Peterson is always reminding me of this, like culture and connectivity. It just is. And it takes a little bit of time to build that, to your point, with so many new faces. Another note, of course, in the Pac-12, Oregon State, they just keep getting banged up with injury after injury after injury. It was a tough loss. I get if you just looked at the score, but putting it into context, what Trent Bray is dealing with, Jim, we haven't seen that injury-wise in a while. Hopefully they get well and get better soon. And for Wazoo, it was a critical win for them, and they need to keep winning. And they need to keep cheering on Texas Tech in the Big 12, keep cheering on Washington in the Big 10. If they keep handling business, they're going to put themselves in the conversation. And remember, their goal is they can't win a league championship, but they can get an at-large bid, right? They'd have to be the 11 seed, at least in our eyes here at Y Option. So more on that as we predict and talk about their game coming up this weekend.
They got to win out. They got to win.
I
mean, let's be realistic. But if they do, they'll be in the conversation because so many other teams will snipe each other off.
Yeah, it'll be a fun conversation indeed. We'll be rooting for them. Still think they're America's team, baby. Who doesn't want the Cougs to win out? Okay, with that said, let's get to our conversation. It was amazing. Nicole Auerbach, you know her from her work in many places, previously at The Athletic, at Big Ten Network, where I get to call home now. She's also now at NBC. She's a college football insider. She's also an analyst on the desk. She does great work every weekend. You can also check out all of her reporting at NBCSports.com. I've been a friend, supporter for years. First time on this show, on this platform, definitely not the last. So on behalf of our founding partner, 76, really excited because they fuel these conversations. Really excited to bring on good friend and expert in all things college football, Nicole Auerbach. And yes, we talked about her in the open on behalf of our partner 76. Here is Nicole Auerbach, the NBC Sports College Football Insider. You do many things. You had a great podcast. You've been a bunch of places. I can recall, though, Nicole, if you can recall, the first time we really hung out for the Piesman in New York City.
I miss that.
Back in the day.
I miss it so much. Honestly, anytime I see like a thick six or large excellence, as we now call these moments, NFL or college, I think of the Piesman. I miss it. It was a lovely award and like snippet of college football.
Right? I mean, Penei Sewell, while it was the NFL, like he almost had a touchdown if it wasn't called back. Right? That would have been so amazing. That's perfect. A Piesman moment. But thank you and congratulations to you. You have been incredible to me throughout my career and just so excited for your success. So with that, mid-season in your new role at NBC, how is it going for you?
It's been awesome. So we were talking about this right before we came on air. Like our schedules are wildly different now because you've had these 9 a.m. Pacific time games that you've been calling on the weekends. And so we've had all these primetime games, which has been really cool. I mean, our schedule has been awesome. We had the 2v3 game last week, so that was huge. But it's been really cool to, figure out, my voice and my insights and to get to serve as an analyst, but also help with, inside information and news. Figuring out, just sort of like how to communicate the biggest stories in college football. And I think this year it's been such an interesting, through line with the 12-team playoff that I think it's made for a lot more connectivity across the sport, which I think has been really awesome. It's been something that, I've tried to emphasize, whenever I have an opportunity, be it our podcast, be it SiriusXM, be it now with you. I mean, I just think there have been so many teams that are still alive in this thing as we sit here mid-October, and also just not writing teams off with the September loss, that I think that's been really cool to make as this sport continues to grow nationally, to like really connect it across the board. And I think, we see that week to week. And I think we see that with the Heisman race this year. It's one of the most intriguing Heisman races we've had in recent years too. And I think a lot of that has to do with, Boise State has a chance to get to the playoff, right? So we can nag everyone and be like, hey, you want to watch Ashton Genty? You really should. Or you could just be like, hey, Boise State might be a problem for someone in the playoff too. And by the way, here's this menacing running back who just kind of stands there. I've been enjoying all the memes of him just standing, no hands on his knees, he's not crouched down. And everyone's just like, oh my God, he's going to go, he's going to break off a 70-yard touchdown run right now. So anyway, all that to say, I just think, getting to cover the sport nationally and to chase the news, but also to chase all of these different storylines and try to connect them. It's been awesome. It's been an awesome season to do it.
Okay, so I want to tell you a story. Earlier this season, I went to Chicago, a place where you live, but you also used to work at Big Ten Network, of course. And I'm there in the touchdown, the green room that you've probably spent many Saturday afternoons and evenings in. And I'm sitting next to our good friend, Ashley Adamson. And she sees you and Maria Taylor on the set. And she just looks over. She goes, that is just awesome. Like just watching you to that point of what you referenced off the top of like, yes, you're an insider and you're an analyst. You got this amazing role. I'm curious for you, like, how do you feel about the influence that either you have or the one that I'm just telling you that you're having on many of us and people that are watching and learning from you?
Yeah, Maria and I really enjoy that. I think it's awesome to have two women on the desk. You don't see that a lot in college football or really in sports in general, but especially this sport. And it's just, I think it shows that women love college football too. We know people, we care, we can talk about it in an educated manner. And just for me, I mean, I've always been, really proud of that. And when I was at BTN, I always totally had nothing but respect for the fact that they put me in an analyst chair too. And I would get to talk, and I always had male hosts and they're awesome, but it was just never a thing. It wasn't I couldn't also opine on these teams. And so it's been really special. One thing I've been starting to hear from coaches is that they really respect it because, a lot of them have daughters and nieces and cousins and people who maybe want to work in sports. And so I think that's been the coolest part over the course of my career is when I was, a little girl falling in love with football because I was watching, Jets games, which I don't recommend coming up through the New York Jets. That's probably not the sport and the team to come up through. But I the only time I ever saw women on TV was they were the sideline reporters or they were the anchor, for SportsCenter. And they were always asking dudes their opinions and their thoughts on things. And so that's been probably the coolest thing over the course of my career is just seeing there's so many different roles for women, especially in football. And so huge credit to NBC and also Maria is an amazing teammate. She's such an advocate as well for other women on air. So it's been super cool. And it's certainly a highlight of my career to get to share a desk with her. And then our pal Joshua Perry, we've added Chris Sims this year. It's just been a lot of fun. And, those days end up being and feeling really long because there's so many games. But when it's people that you're just going to joke with and make fun of the whole time, and then you've got a setup where you're watching 8 games at once, it's really hard to complain that this is a job and that we're missing things in order to prioritize watching football with friends.
Yeah, it's enjoyable to watch all of you. I love seeing Castle on the road every once in a while and behind the scenes, right? Whether it's Justin Karp or Ron or Elise. I know there's a lot of really incredible people that you get to work with. So with that said, you touched upon the game that was primetime on NBC over the weekend. I think the rest of the country probably heard of that game as well. We're talking about Ohio State and Oregon. Yeah, so I went back and watched it because I was calling a game as they were relatively going on at the same time. But you were living it in real time. What was that like for you? And then does your opinion after what you said on set in real time adjust here 36 hours later or so?
Yeah, so it was really interesting to watch it play out because backtracking all of this in the preseason, I'm all right, let's make some preseason CFP picks, which was really hard to do, especially with just the coaching turnover at a number of these top programs. But I also wanted to zig where other people were zagging a little bit. So a lot of people were picking Texas. They were picking Ohio State. They were picking some Georgia, right? So I said, let's go with Oregon. I believe in Dylan Gabriel. I think that he was the most important quarterback pickup, him and Cam Ward, where I thought, the clear top tier of the quarterbacks that were available. Experience, the way that we saw him win Red River last year, he's capable of that. And I picked him to win the Heisman too, right? So I was all right, if these two things happen, or if one of these things happen, the other thing is going to be right up there and have a chance to happen too. So then the first couple of weeks, the completion percentage is great, but the O-line's not protecting him. They're eking out wins, and everyone's wondering if Oregon was overrated. And I kind of, was just kind of in wait and see mode. I mean, they started to get better. They moved things around on the O-line. It started to gel, started to come together better. But coming into this game, I felt like we had seen and learned more about Ohio State and that they were more solid on both sides of the ball. Again, no, they did not play an offense at all like Dylan Gabriel and company, but I felt that they had the clear edge. And even though they'd be going on the road into a really hostile environment, I just thought Ohio State, the talent would get them there. And instead, Oregon plays better than we've seen them play all season on both sides. I thought they did a really good job with Ohio State's run game. I thought that they did well at both lines of scrimmage. Dylan Gabriel obviously was really, really good. After a couple weeks of these red zone interceptions, He takes care of the ball. He uses his legs when he needs to, which, I had talked to a number of coaches who had played both these teams heading in, and that was one of the things they said. They said he hasn't really been using his legs, but that's what he does in the biggest of games, and you probably see it. And so that became a factor. And so I came out of this game just incredibly impressed with Oregon. I think that obviously we talk about signature wins all the time in college football, and this is the definition of that for Dan Lanning and for Oregon. And it's just amazing to have after an off season where a bunch of big jobs open and you had Dan Lanning say, nope, I'm good. I want to win a national championship here. Well, this was that next step, winning games like this. On the other side, I still think Ohio State's a really, really, really good team. But I do think I am much more concerned about their defense when they play really good offenses. And a lot of people are pulling the stats of Jim Knowles' defenses against Michigan the last 3 times, and they've lost, this Oregon game, and the last time they played Oregon, which I also covered that game in Columbus a few years back. And, you do have to be concerned about the lack of pressure they get, the lack of sacks they get, their inability to get off the field. And just in general, I think the end of that game was deeply concerning as an Ohio State fan, right? Because you look at just the fact that you needed a field goal. You should have been able to get down the field and attempt a field goal to win that game with that much time left. There's the sack, there's the time management and clock management that we all talked about with the 12 men on the field, the clock bleeding. And then Will Howard, a veteran quarterback, the game shouldn't end with the ball not getting to the end zone, either in a kick or a throw. So there were just a lot of frustrating points, I think, for Ohio State coming out of this. But I still expect that these two teams are going to be there in the Big Ten championship game. I think they're going to make the college football playoff. But I do think there are definitely some more trend line concerns about their defense when they actually go up against some of the best offenses in the country. These last few years, they've really struggled for Ohio State.
So there's a lot of chatter about the 12 men on the field. Are you
think it was on
theorist
purpose?
In that regard? I'm curious your takeaway. I watched it a few times this morning and definitely have an opinion, but I'm curious what yours is as well.
Okay, so obviously in the moment you think it's a mistake because why would you have a penalty like that? But watching the reactions from people to it happening in real time, it seemed like it wasn't the worst thing in the world, that it wasn't something that was like, oh my gosh, this is a crushing mistake. So I don't know, because you also you look at the reaction of Dan Lanning and company after the kick where they kicked it off it bounced off the Ohio State player and they were able to recover it. Kind of the same thing where you're like, wow, if this was on purpose, that's kind of genius. So where are you on that? Do you think the 12 man was on purpose?
I don't think so. No,
I like to think that it could be, though. I like the ability to squeeze through the rules and find these things.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you play it out, right, if it's a big explosive play, or if it's a nothing, right, it was an incomplete pass, either way, the play is going to happen and the ticks are going to come off the clock and they're going to end up at 6 seconds either way. So I went back and forth. I think from a body language standpoint, you talk to the players there. Evan Stewart even said it after the game, the number one goal for them was to stay poised. Right. So I think you can't really read into your point of Dan Lanning's body language of it looked like poise versus we got him a little smirk, right, or a Belichickian smirk, if you will, right, from a guy who used to always find little loopholes here and there. So I netted out as a negative, and they had to move on to the very next snap. But I definitely enjoyed reading a variety of different opinions, which is kind of how college football is. Depending which fan base you're on, you either love the refs, hate the refs. Same day when you call a game, right? I'm sure it's same deal for you on social media. You make a statement that celebrates one team, the other team hates you, or at least for the span of a couple hours, which is all good, par for the course. To your point about the grass being pretty damn green in Eugene, I felt coming into the season that Dan Lanning would take up the oxygen that Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh had left behind in major college football. I think he had done it already. And then in this game, it seemed like he did it on an even grander scale. I'm curious for you if that was felt in your green room, if it was felt on the set, not only here come the Ducks, the most unique brand, I think, in college football, because it's just different than anybody else's, but also here comes this team that I would argue is the most improved team among the top 20 teams in America this year, if you reference the first 2 weeks and the one they just had.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's kind of been one of the faces of the sport the last few years. If I were starting a college football team, this is why, when the Alabama job opens or A&M, you immediately think of Dan Lanning, because that age energy, approach to recruiting, approach to the portal, approach to the style of play, the SEC mentality and experience that he brings. Like that's exactly what you would want in a head coach coaching a major college football team today. So I have thought that he could absolutely be that face of the sport for a long time. And I think like Kirby Smart has absolutely filled a lot of that Nick Saban, like elder statesman. What does he think on these issues? He's like on the rules committee. There's like other elements where he's got, you know, his fingerprints all over the sport too. But Dan Lanning is absolutely ripe to be the face of the sport. And I think getting this win after not having had a top 5 win, after being, you know, this close against Washington twice last year, it absolutely kind of pushes him over the edge for that. And it's like, it's the way, like he was so emotional in the post game and he's running around and you can't tell if he wants to hug someone or like headbutt someone. Like he's just such a unique guy. And it's awesome for college football that we have him. And I think it's great that now like they have a very clear path to the college football playoff, very clear path to the Big Ten title game. All of that is good because he's been right there. He's been knocking on the door. I heard someone put it this way, that like, through the history of college football in the last like decade and a half, Oregon's been in a lot of the stories. Like they've been in the games that have helped define it. They've been in moments. They've obviously had a Heisman Trophy winner and been in the mix. But they don't always get to be the main character because they lose in some of those big games that we like are tentpole moments for the sport. But now they're the main character. Dan Lanning is the main character. Dillon Gabriel's Heisman odds shot way up, which they should after a performance like that. So yeah, I mean, like, for all the talk of East Coast bias, for all the talk of realignment and this and that, and, you know, Oregon's path to the playoff, like they are front and center now, and they've got our attention for the rest of the year after a win like that. And just the way that they did it, I think, too, in a game where honestly they probably should have won by more, right? There were a lot of points that they left out on the field in the botched extra point and the failed 2-pointer and spitting penalty and ejection and a goal to go situation. And yet they still figure out a way to win. And Dan Lanning goes berserk at the end. It was awesome.
It really was everything we love about college football, and your crew of Noah and Todd we're all over it as usual. You know, we pride ourselves here at Y Option of being college football through the lens of the West Coast, right? At the end of the season, USC will host Notre Dame, a team that you watch probably every single snap of. Curious your take on Notre Dame as we're beginning to really have like some playoff conversation. The rankings are only a week and a half or 2 weeks away from really coming to fruition. And then here's SC, who's 13 points away from being undefeated. When you look at all of their games, much like Ohio State, 2 plays, and maybe it's a different game. It's a different storyline today than what it was on Saturday. Same could be said for the Trojans. So I'm curious what you think about the Irish, and then also what you net out around USC out here on the West Coast.
Yeah, well, I'll start with USC because you're right. Like they could easily be unbeaten. And I think the fact that they've lost these games in incredibly painful ways where they've had leads late and certainly had opportunity to win all of them just must be so frustrating for Trojan fans and people who want to see Lincoln Riley's program take the next step, because now you just see all of these records and these stats and how he compares to Clay Helton at this point in his tenure, which is not someone you want to be compared to in terms of USC coaching history. Lost 8 of their last 13. And I think it's just the way that they're losing that's the tough part. Because I think as a whole, obviously they're better defensively this year. But you've got slow starts, you've got some clock management issues, concerns about like the line play against some of these Big Ten teams. So it's just really tough. And I think even in a world where, you don't get eliminated off of 1 loss or even 2 losses in this new college football playoff, with 3 at the midpoint of the season and the way that they were, I just think it's really tough sledding to just kind of figure out what you play for the rest of the way here. I think Notre Dame has gotten a lot better. They've had some really brutal injury luck, and particularly a couple key defensive players. So that could absolutely impact how they go the rest of the season. But the big concern with them was their passing game and if it was going to exist at all. Riley Leonard's a really good runner. He's very tough. He gets injured because he, throws his body around on the field, but he really hadn't thrown. What was the stat? It was like it took 3 weeks for a touchdown pass, right, from him. Their first touchdown pass of the season was from their backup quarterback. Like it wasn't clicking. He was missing wide open guys and also just like felt very disjointed. They don't have, I wouldn't say maybe elite receivers. I like Bo Collins a lot, but they, there's definitely some questions there. But I think a lot of that has been figured out in recent weeks. And coming off a bye, I thought they were particularly good in their last outing against Stanford. And like, to me, this is, we're watching a team get better over the course of the season, which I do think in the new playoff world, you get credit for that. Like you do have chances to stay in this. And if their only loss is to Northern Illinois, yes, that's a bad loss, but that will not keep them from making the playoff. If they're the system is not set up for a one-loss Notre Dame team to be left out. And especially if you're able to show the offensive growth that we've seen from them. And also the committee would know Riley Leonard was injured, missed all of spring football. It's taken time for him to get more and more comfortable in the pass game. So all that to say, again, injuries could factor into this, but as of right now, still, even with injuries, Notre Dame has a CFP caliber defense. Like that was always going to be a strength. I remember Marcus Freeman told me before the season, like, no questions, no issues, no questions on that side of the ball. The questions were on the offensive side. And I think that they've really improved that way as well. So I think that they will be in the mix. I think they will be entering that game against USC, although they will have to go through undefeated Army, undefeated Navy. Love to see that from the service academy. So those are tough games. But yeah, I mean, I think they'll be playing, potentially like essentially a play-in game for the college football playoff when they play USC, because they don't have a conference championship game. And I don't think they're going to lose between now and then.
Yeah, that one will be fascinating. And imagine Boise State going to South Bend if you had 12v5, right? It'd be everything that we love about college football. I would love to like move the Heisman a couple weeks just to see a little bit of the playoff. I think it'd be fun just based on the big stages and the quote unquote Heisman moments. Okay, so
that's going to be weird, Yogi, by the way, that like the Heisman will be given out before like 11 playoff games are played.
Yes, I think a lot needs to be at least discussed around that, whether it's like 800 plus voters and or when you and I have talked about this many times. Preaching the choir. Yeah. So with that said, okay, so we just went down like the analyst role with you. Take me into the insider role with you, because I think amid last week, which you could argue was the best slate of games of the season thus far, I think like news got lost. And I'm a recruiting nerd. Like love signing day, have always loved signing day, have been in a signing day forever. Like, is there a signing day? What has happened with letters of intent, collectives, schools now approving how much money they're going to pay players? Like, can you give some clarity to that? I know you've been all over the story.
Yeah, so this was a few months in the works. So basically the National Letter of Intent program is run by the Commissioners Association, which is kind of strange. Actually, it's like not under the NCAA. So they had been looking at like, is this feel outdated? Is this something that we should have? It's a pretty binding agreement, right? As we all know, it's hard to get out of. And it's been an issue when there's been coaching changes or things where there have been other rule changes to release people from their national letters of intent. And honestly, a lot of people, especially if you've been getting like legal advice or have like smart advisors around you, there were people who were signing different financial aid agreements in the first place and not this actual NLI document. So they were kind of moving away from it in the first place. And now it will be these other financial aid agreements. Plus, and we're still figuring out this new world, but the House settlement got preliminary approval. So people are still moving towards like a world where you have direct payments to players from their school revenue share next year. And then, there can certainly be NIL deals on top of that. But like, there's going to have to be different contractual agreements related to that. And every school is going to have to figure out how they're sharing the revenue, who gets what cut of it, what the amount is. But there's basically just going to be different documents is the way that I've been thinking about it for recruits to sign with their schools. And I don't know what that means for like the idea of a signing day or a ceremony. I think you could still do it. I think, signing your financial aid agreement, you could still do those things. But as we know, even now, if you're verbally commit, or you sign something, people still talk to you, right? There's still like, it's not like recruiting is completely over. And now with the portal, everyone just stays in touch because, hey, maybe you decide you want to change your mind in 2 years. So, I just think all of that has been in flux. And so it's not quite like this, like super binding, amazing announcement ceremony because you'll go there for 4 years. That part has already shifted. But after you talk to some of these quarterbacks, they're figuring out for next year, let me know what they decide. Cause I'm curious if they're still going to like celebrate, the signing moment.
Okay, 2 quick follow-ups to that, and I really appreciate your time today. It's been a blast. if I am a high school quarterback, let's just say I'm a 5-star QB, I'm an Elite 11 quarterback, and I'm going to go sign at X school. I'm not signing my national letter of intent anymore. We just discussed that is off the table. I'm going to sign a financial aid agreement and or NIL agreement, however you want to coin that, rev share, etc. Can I do that like November 1? Can I do that December 1? Can I sign 2 of them? Like, do you have any clarity around that so schools can say, hey, this guy's been committed to us, and now we expect him to sign on a specific date to at least lock in the financial agreement part of it?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So you still have, right now, you still have the signing periods as they're scheduled. And they moved the early signing period up. So it's now before the transfer portal window opens. So it's right around like conference championship weekend now. And it's a 3-day period. So like, again, part of this was December was crazy for coaches. It was crazy from a roster management standpoint, preparing for games. And now there's more meaningful games in December. But also just felt like the high school players kind of got lost in the shuffle a little bit with the portal just being so overwhelming. There were a lot of coaches that said, hey, we want to make sure that we sign our guys and then, figure out the portal after and like to supplement. So we'll see how that works because this is the first year of that. But then you still have the same dates in February. There's still, and then again, this is a commissioner decision. Again, maybe it'll move depending on everything that's changing governance wise. But it's possible that like you do end up adding a summer signing period, which is something that some coaches like and some coaches dislike. And there's definitely been pushback from some high school coaching associations. But I like that idea because I think it takes out the fall of your senior year. You don't have to worry about things. Obviously, you could lock in someone who then like kind of has a glow up and then maybe has different options. So that could be different. That could be detrimental to a player. Or like if you're the SEC, you don't care. You could have the latest possible signing date because you're just going to wait and be like, oh, somebody became available and played really well. Like we could probably get in on that if we're Georgia. But so it depends who you talk to, of like what they actually want. But I like the idea of a summer thing because I think I would be one of those guys who would just want to make a decision to be done and have people stop bothering me. So if I had an opportunity to sign the new financial aid agreement, whatever, the documents end up being, I would want to do that. So I think that's still on the table. I think it's too early to like kind of, guess where it's going to land or if that's going to happen. But you do have that piece of this puzzle that is still not 100%. And we've seen them tinker with this and the portal windows a lot over the last couple of years. So we'll have to see. But right now it's just the regular signing periods, except that the December one now is kind of like at the end of November or into December, right around championship games.
Yeah, it'll be fun to track. There'll be amazing elements. And as always in college football, unintended consequences after every single rule gets made. To that point, I want to cut you loose with this. It is rumored that one of our favorite shows in the history of planet Earth, which is behind me, a little Ted Lasso love as well, is filming another season. I know you're like, you've got biscuits. They send you stuff. Like, are you gonna be a reporter in next season? Are you like, have they offered you up at least a line on this show yet?
No, that would be amazing. That would honestly be like a dream come true. Between like the cool stuff I've gotten sent, it's like the Ted Lasso box where they like included tea and a jersey versus like the Pop-Tarts bowl sending me a Pop-Tart costume. Like, I can't decide. I mean, these are like my 2 children. I can't pick a favorite. But I do hope that rumor is true. I feel like it would have gotten shot down if it wasn't happening. So I can't wait. I hope we get a lot more of, I want Keely and Roy to get back together. Like I just have a lot of like things on my wish list that we can talk about off air. But just a fantastic show. I'm so glad that so many people love it. And I also love how many coaches have taken elements of that like into the way that they coach, which I think is really cool. Cause like, again, this started as a commercial and now it became like a very beloved kind of an all-time show, which is cool.
Yeah, there's hope. There's hope and belief everywhere, led by Ted Lasso and company. So to the producers, hey, if you want 2 reporters, you want us to be broadcasters, Nicole, we got you. Okay, we are here for you. Thank you for being here for us. I know you love merch. We'll make sure we send you a little Y option merch and bring you back on maybe later on in the season. Keep kicking butt and inspiring so many people. It really has been amazing to watch. Not surprised by your success one iota. And thank you again for sharing a little time with us.
Oh, thank you so much. You're going to make me all emotional. I'm so excited to watch you thrive. And I'm so glad that now the Big Ten audiences get to learn more about you and West Coast football.
Appreciate it. Stay safe. Talk to you soon. It's the afterglow. Here we are, Yogi Roth, Jim Thornby. That was Nicole Auerbach, presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Wherever you are, I know you enjoyed that conversation and learned something from NBC's college football insider, as well as podcast host and, of course, analyst. She's got an amazing role there at NBC. Check her out every single Saturday, talking all things college football. They get a great game every weekend in prime time. They also have Notre Dame and a handful of other games at times within the Big Ten Conference. Jim, what was your takeaway from our conversation with Nicole?
I thought what was really interesting, we're talking about, that female representation, as an analyst on the desk. And it's funny because I remember, just maybe a few weeks ago with Ashley not being at Big Ten and her role being a little bit different than stuff that she did at Pac-12 and being a little bit more of an analyst. I texted her, I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of digging this, like this new side of you, Ash, like getting stuff like that. So it was cool to see that, because it's obvious, you're getting different perspectives. Like you want to hear different voices, especially when not just for the sake of being different, but you're getting people that know what they're talking about. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it makes it an interesting, and I mean this in the positive sense, an interesting watch. Like you're learning something from, like, seeing through different eyes than you would watch.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun whenever you have somebody kind of like Bruce Feldman as well, right? Who's a true insider, knows so many things, and so many great relationships with the coaches, and then also commenting on the game through that lens. Like, I think it's a really unique one, and really grateful for her time with us on this podcast and this conversation. I think my biggest takeaway was not only what she said about Notre Dame. I thought that was really cool, because we got to track that as the year goes on. And I love the idea of November playing games. I think it just makes the playoff even more exciting. So where will SC be at the time? Where will Notre Dame be at the time? We talked in the front half of this podcast, like, where will Washington State be at the time? Like, there'll be a lot at play there. Boise State, of course, as well. Also, I thought the recruiting stuff, I think last week it just kind of got passed over based on the new regulations that have been passed in college football. The transfer portal windows have shrunk, right? They have adjusted a little bit. The signing day period is still a 3-day window, about 72 hours, where you can, quote unquote, sign, but the way you're signing is different. So between now and then, in early December, will it be public? How much you sign for? What will that financial agreement look like? I still think there's some questions there. We'll have a full episode dedicated to recruiting towards the back half of the season, because I think it's really vital for people to just understand the landscape. But I really appreciated the clarity that she shared with us in that regard. And then, of course, who doesn't share a love of Ted Lasso? So we'll make another pitch. Get Nicole on. Happy to join you. Whatever you need. I'm sure Jim would as well. One of the best shows. Yeah, there it is. Believe. Okay, thank you for believing in us. That was a Week 7 recap, a mini look ahead, big emphasis on the Ducks, and we got games coming up fast as well. I'm going back to the roots, Jim. This week, I'm preparing for UCLA. They almost beat Minnesota. I mean, they had every opportunity to do it. They didn't. Minnesota, congrats to PJ Fleck and company. They get a win. But I'm tracking the Bruins as they go east to Piscataway for a 9 a.m. Pacific game. Be calling that one this week on FS1 with the same guys, same crew, Guy Haberman and Rhett Lewis. I'll be diving all into Rutgers and UCLA. Looking forward to that one on the East Coast. And I get to see my fam. And the last time I was there for a game, Jim, I caught a dig route, kind of like Terrence Ferguson. We'll see if we can find the film gearing up to chop in Piscataway with Rutgers. Thank you, as always, man. Lots of love, and lots of love to all of you for signing up and following our journey at yoption.com. Let us know what you think. And just like the gear that Jim is rocking or the hat right behind me, you can get your own merch as well. Just go to yoption.com. See that little merch logo? Go get yourself some. Let us know what you like. If you want something different, we will try to do our very best as we enter Week 8 here in college football. Peace.